Hey everyone, this is the Love of Cinema podcast. We like to talk movies. If you like to talk movies too, you come to the right place.
But when I heard the production, I was sad. I was something never heard in my life, what he did with that song. So that's how the thing happened. And I was so motivated to shoot the song so well, partly because of Varma, partly because of Urmila. To capture her beauty and with the aid of a sound created by Rahman was like a once in a lifetime opportunity, I thought.
I can still recall quite well the very first time I watched Raat. It was the mid-90s. I was quite young, and my exposure to the horror genre was almost entirely relegated to Ramsay Brothers' pulpy horror cinema of the 80s. Raat was such a refreshingly immersive experience for me that I was zapped by its atmospheric spookiness, its well-constructed jump scares, and the film's overall storytelling prowess. Then, in 1995, Rangila released, and Ram Gopal Varma soon became a household name. And then, of course, he made a series of crime films that pretty much cemented his place as one of our modern greats. For the next decade or so, well into the mid-2000s, I religiously watched all of his Hindi films, as well as quite a few of his Telugu films. Like many kids, growing up in the 90s, RGV was that auteur whose movies I would eagerly await, follow, and dissect. This is Himanshu, and you're listening to the Love of Cinema podcast. But before moving on, an important friendly reminder. If you enjoy organic conversations centered on Indian cinema, Love of Cinema podcast was created for people just like you. So if you find value in the podcast, if it helps you in discovering new films or new facets about familiar films, do consider supporting the show. Love of Cinema podcast is my passion project, and with every episode, I've attempted to create something that cinephiles will continue to find value, not just today, but over time as well. To create something that goes beyond banter, beyond trending films. So if you find value in the conversations on the podcast, please do consider supporting the show. Your support will help me continue creating content with shelf life for fans of Indian cinema everywhere. You'll find the link to support the show in the show notes. You can also support the show directly from the podcast website. It's fast, it's easy, and your support is greatly appreciated. Independent pods like this one don't have a platform for amplification and distribution. Independent pods rely on amplification through its listeners. So if you like the episode, please share the episode on social media, as that will help other people discover the podcast. Back to today's episode. Having RGV on the podcast is no less than a fanboy moment for me. Also, I'm glad that we were able to connect around the time that Satya, which he says is the film he's most proud of, turns 25. For 2 hours, I got a chance to ask RGV many of the things that I always wanted to ask him about Satya and his other films, and the scenes from those movies. We also talked about the women in his films, the male gaze in his films, which often receives its fair share of criticism, and other things, like traversing the arc from a fanboy to a key collaborator with respect to Bachchan, his work with Urmila, and some of the short films that he made during the pandemic. Films that almost played like grindhouse exploitation movies. We've wrapped up with a fun round of rapid fire game I call Shoot, where I made him pick between Ayn Rand and Sridevi. And now, RGV, the original gangster. Here goes. Hey RGV, how are you doing?
Yeah, fine. Hi, Himanshu.
Thank you so much, RGV, for coming on the podcast. I'm excited. We have a lot to talk, so let's get right to it. I wanted to start with a personal note. When I started this podcast a few years ago, I
Hmm.
decided to do something I had heard you mention in one of your interviews years ago. You
Yeah.
mentioned that you always make movies that you yourself would enjoy as a moviegoer. That
Huh.
way, even if no one else in the world likes your movie, there's always one person who does. That's you. Now, you probably said that, half jokingly, but that made a
Yeah.
lot of sense to me.
I'd like to say, I just want to clarify something. This has been something I've been saying for the last 2 decades, but no one seems to understand. See, I always maintain that any filmmaker can only make a film which he is excited about because the audience are not a bunch of sheep, that they all don't have the same mind. So it conveniently, we will stick a label to them, calling them the audience, as if they all have the same taste and sensibility and whatever it is. So either you have a choice of making something what you yourself like to see, or you can probably copy something which seemed to be successful. You know what released recently, it became a blockbuster, so you think the audience want to see maybe something like this. So though I don't like it, but I will make it for them. The only two choices I think any filmmaker can have. you know so if I don't know you, for example, I'm first time talking to you, and I don't know what film I can make which you will like. you know so if I don't know you as one person, what makes me think I understand the audience, who are different people. Yeah.
Yeah,
So you
man.
can make what you like, and you can hope that there'll be enough people to justify the kind of a cost that picture is made. Yeah.
Right, right, right. And it's always a gamble, right? I mean, you don't know
Yeah.
how it's going to turn out. You never know which film is going to work and so forth.
Mm.
So you still follow that? You're still you still live by
Yeah,
that?
I always followed that right from my first film, mainly because I don't have any other choice.
Right.
If my debut film when I made called Shiva, now I don't think if I ever thought about the audience I could have made it, because at that time no one was making such a film which looks like that, or treated like that. So it was my excitement about why I want to see that film.
RGV, now you will be, you have been making films for almost 35 years, right? It's been a
Yeah.
long time, more than 3 decades. What has been the high point of those 35 years, according to you? Not according to the box office, not according to
Mhm.
awards, not according to critics, but in your eyes, what do you think, if you look back on these 35 years, what have been some of the high points?
Yeah. The high point actually is not the films, but because of the people I happen to meet, or I had the opportunity to meet because of the films, not for the films. See, a film eventually is a series of decisions you take over a long period of time, from time to time, and it comes together. And more often than not, I would like to believe the filmmaker loses track of the film actually by the time he finishes it, because he's been through it in so many times and so many different ways and so many perspectives. So the high point is because of the recognition the films got, or I got. I just happened to meet some highly interesting people, which made my life really worthwhile. That's what I would like to say.
Yes, yes, and we'll talk about your collaborations with some of the actors later on. But I remember you have been a magnet for like budding creative talent. Since you started making movies. Everybody from Kashyap, Madhur Bhandarkar, E. Nivas, Atul Sabharwal, Shimit Amin, Shriram Raghavan, many others got their start in movies working with you. My question to you is that when you were getting started in maybe late 80s, early 90s, which Indian filmmakers or writers did you admire or look up to and you wanted to work with them?
I wouldn't say I wanted to work with them, because so somehow I always believe that you don't need to work with someone to become a filmmaker. But who influenced me, I would say, definitely Sholay has been one of my biggest influential film. And then there was Sham Benegal's Kalyug, and Ardis Satya of Govind Hilani. And then, of course, Mr. K. Balchandar down south. So I would say these are 3 or 4 filmmakers who definitely put some mark on me as far as Indian directors are concerned. Yeah.
And you did assist before Shiva, right? You did 2 films as an
I
assistant?
did, yeah. But Technically, you see, because I was so bad as an assistant director, and so I used to lose the clapboard and continuity book and things like that. So I would say I would more of as an observer, and I was just trying to get some time with the producer to somehow pitch my idea and to convince them I don't need to be working as an assistant to make a film. So I was using that opportunity for that rather than really assisting. So I was a bad assistant director. Let me put it that way. Yeah.
And this was the late 80s, right?
Yeah.
How
I
easy?
would say 86, 87, something
I
like
see.
that. Yeah.
Mid 80s or so. Okay. How I don't know much about the Telugu film industry at that time, but was it easy for somebody like you who absolutely has no background, hasn't assisted anybody? How do you go about trying to get funding for your first film?
See, was it easy? I would say I never took it as something difficult, you know, because I think as a process of trying to get someone to give you a film, I enjoyed that too, you know. So I can't say I worked hard. It was a terrible time. I can't say that. But luckily for me, Nagarjuna, who gave me my first break, he also has a very, very modern mindset, and I could communicate with him very easily. You know, I think that was just a good fortune for me to have someone like that. You know, so if not for Nagarjuna, probably I would have had some trouble. I would think. So I think I was a very good narrator. I mean, the way I narrated, people used to be really impressed even in my college times. I think that helped me a lot in terms of having that kind of an ability. Yeah.
Arjun, let's talk about now some of the style in your filmmaking. One of the things that always stands out and has always stood out is the shot taking in your movies. It has always involved these innovative and interesting angles. Right from the very first film, Shiva,
Yeah.
the storytelling was always punctuated, by interesting point of view angles. Can you talk a bit about why you often experiment with angles and the thinking behind that?
I think the two things. One is I was very heavily influenced in my growing years by Steven Spielberg, and that is when I actually first realized the importance of angles or shortcutting or taking the way we call it in India. You know? I think I use compositions like almost like an editor uses storytelling in terms of the I'm very, very particular about the composition. I don't care so much about lighting as much as the composition aspect. So basically, the actor's expression, I mean, I believe in something what I call, I mean, the name is given by myself, like a point of interest. So in any given frame, I always feel the audience will watch at this particular spot. You know, I mean, spot, I don't mean it as in a pinpoint, but general area of focus for them in any given frame will be this. So I would to highlight that is what I would be particularly concentrating upon. It could be the eyes, it could be something which is happening in the shot. So rest of it, I take it. I mean, I don't take it that seriously as long as point of interest is coming into the thing. So the because of that, I have a very specific, I mean, intention. So I think that translates as a very different kind of a frame. It's probably something people don't usually see. You know. So I think many times I meet people in the airport who say something like, I love your frames. They say something like that. And I think they mostly make these dark films. So the intensity of the frame is what is translated. That's my personal way, is the way I want to look at the world. I want to look at the character. I want to look at a given visual, you know. So I think that personality projection is what which translates into the frame looking somewhat unique.
I see. Do you think that technique somewhere down the line, started overshadowing some of the storytelling, and perhaps you got a little bit carried away with the angles in some of the movies, straying away from the storytelling?
See, I would like to believe that, like I love this one line of Hitchcock I read long time back. See, he says, the technique can elevate a film, it cannot carry it. You know, There's a very thin line in terms of, So I would like to believe without my technique, if I took a subject matter which is not working, which is wrong, the technique would have elevated it little more, but it can't bring it down. So I could have taken a bad subject, maybe not treated it right. But I believe that whatever is given, the technique actually has elevated it. I would think the reverse.
Right. I was going to ask you about a particular movie of yours, Department. I remember that in that, the angles, just one man's opinion, but I thought
Yes,
the
yes,
angles
fair
were a
enough.
little bit overdone. And I was wondering, was that deliberate?
Yeah. See, I believe Department, even if it was shot with normal cameras and not having any kind of this so-called weird angles, I would still think it will be as bad, coming back into quote Hitchcock. Because if you look at it, if there's something like Natural Born Killers, which Oliver Stone made in the early 90s, that's probably the most weirdest camera work ever anyone has seen at that time. But it works because it was dealing with the
Good
kind
point.
of characters, the Woody Harrelson and Juliette Lewis. I think the mistake I made in Department is any film which goes wrong, I think it goes wrong because of the director's failure in creating characters one can connect to. One can empathize with, one can be scared of. I think that's what is wrong with the Department and not the camera work. That's my opinion. Yeah.
So it was the writing that was weak.
Yes,
even
writing, more than writing is one part, but more than that, I would like to believe it's the characterizations. They look very fake, all of them. I think it's not real. That's what I would describe it as, yeah.
Interesting. The close-ups, RGB, you often employ close-ups. I was watching Nach a couple of days ago, and there are some really nice close-ups in that film. Some of Amitabh Bachchan's best close-ups can be found in your movies. Close-ups can be like a double-edged sword. What's the appeal of a close-up for you?
I think close-up for me is the nearest to how close you can come to the emotion of an actor, of the character, I mean. So I think I give a lot of emphasis on close-ups for that because of that. And if you look at it, there was very little dialogue in Amitabh Bachchan's close-up in Sarkar, for example, And but not only Sarkar, I generally have a tendency where I don't want to give any room to the viewer except just to get immersed in the emotion of the said character. That's what I think close-ups do.
But then, for example, what happens? There are some actors who are not that visually expressive. That they might be talking with their eyes, or and maybe they're just not some of the best actors. So, do you try to avoid close-ups when you're working with those actors, or how do you differentiate?
I do that. Not that I don't do it, but okay. I'll give an example. There is a shot in Shiva, where Nagarjuna sees the body, which is covered in a bed sheet. Okay, Nag is not a very good actor. Okay, but that emotion was very, very.
This is on record.
Yeah. See, he's got a great screen presence and everything. I mean, I'm saying in the context of what I wanted to do,
right.
Everybody has a limitation, even me as a director. The point is when he's shocked, he sees the body and he slowly walks to the body and he's shaking hands, he removes the bed sheet and then he suddenly closes his eyes, and then as he looks up, there's a rage in his eyes. And as he gets up, I cut to the door suddenly opening in the villain's place. Now, this is a complex thing, the kind of what I described now in terms of the emotional progression. Now, I know there is no way I can get that from Nagarjuna at that point of time, because Shiva also have to understand Nagarjuna was doing very, very mainstream masala films at that time. This kind of realistic portrayal was not what he was used to. So what I did was, this is a very sneaky tricks I played in the scene. So I just had a zoom camera on a crane, and from the top I just put a close up of Nagarjuna, and as the crane arm is going back, I started zooming in. So that created a slightly wave-like motion because of the description. So I didn't let the audience what do you call, focus on eyes of Nagarjuna. That's where I will give away that he's not performing as good. So because of the wave motion, something becoming wider and closer, audience will get distracted from concentrating on Nagarjuna's face, And then the music director Ilayaraja gave one solo violin thing, which which set the mood. So then I cut to a back shot of him walking towards the body. So audience still think he's performing because of the first shot. Then as he sits down and as he proceeds to take the bed sheet off, I cut to a close-up of his hand with shaking hand, and as he picks it up, and by the time, and then I cut to the forward shot, and he suddenly closes his eyes, so that again they don't see his eyes. So this is where I made him act without showing him whether he's acting or not. Now this is just a tricks of the director. What do they do? So then as he looks up with rage in his eyes, that's about the only close-up where you register. But all this multitude of emotions, you just imagine that you've seen him do, which actually didn't. Yeah.
And how do you think about these tricks? I mean, this is like on the set, or you have already, kind of scribbled something on your notes?
No. I don't ever scribble notes. I mean, I just have very instinctive feel to how to construct a scene in shots. But I'm sure that a lot of it I've derived from watching Spielberg's films in my early years. Yeah.
Right. It's an instinct that you have cultivated.
Yeah.
Anjali, let's talk about the women in your films. You often receive criticism for, going overboard with the male gaze in shooting women. But rarely does anyone mention that you have always had strong women characters in your films, whether it's Millie of Rangila, Reva of Nach. And moreover, one of the things that I noticed when I was, going through some of the movies for this particular podcast is that all the mothers from the films that you have made are so memorable. I mean, right from Rohini Hattangadi in Raat to Rima Lagu in Rangila, Seema Biswas in Company, Smita Jayakar in Mast, Supriya Pathak in Sarkar. In fact, even the lady who plays Tanisha's mother in Sarkar, very small role, but you don't tend to forget them. What are your comments on this?
See, I would like to think there are two things which are for me, they play a very strong impression in mind. Like one is power and sexuality of women. Okay. So in the contest, if there is something like a Rangila, where there is glamour induced into that in the characters and the subject matter of the film, and when there's no glamour, I tend to make any of my characters powerful, whether it is the male protagonist or the antagonist or any woman character. So I think it's my fascination for power which actually makes the women characters strong. It's not so much about my probably impression on the woman by herself. I like to see power all the time. Yeah.
And what about the criticism about the going overboard with the male gaze?
I mean, that's fine. That's an opinion, because I really love to see women's bodies. And whenever I get the chance to insert that in the film, overboard and underboard is when I believe that there's no such thing as underboard and overboard. It's about my sensibility. It's about my way of looking at things. Yeah.
Fair enough.
I don't know if it's fair enough, but that's me.
No. I mean, I made fair enough in the sense that there is a reason why you do that. So yes. The background music in your movies, more often than not, in your earlier movies, I remember the background music used to be much more subdued and understated for the most part. But then at some point in your career, and, this is totally, I'm just guessing this, but maybe sometime after Sarkar, more often than not, the background music started getting louder, more pronounced. Was that a deliberate change in style and how you saw the role of the background music in your films?
I mean, I don't think it's illegal. I never thought for myself, let me have this more pronounced and more stronger than earlier films. I go by my instinct of what I feel. Also, one more thing, what happens, it could be a reason, I mean, but that doesn't explain why it won't happen in some films or it won't happen. Like by the time you reach the end in post-production, generally what happens is you're so used to hear the dialogue all the time because on editing time and everything, you kind of get fatigued by it. So the background score is a new element which comes. You tend to fall in love with that, and rather than hear the dialogue, you want to hear the music. But for the audience, they're watching it for the first time. It's possible they'll get irritated with with the loudness, you know. But having said that, for example, you take something like Sarkar. I remember this company DOP Himanshu Joglekar told me I walked out in the first 30 minutes, but I couldn't bear the background score, you know. But then there are others who think that is the best part of the film. They'll always hear these diverse opinions, you know. But I tend to use background a lot, always. It's not like, could be some films, it wasn't there as much, but mostly I do use. For example, Ratha Charitra is a very loud film in that context, you know, and the kind of violence. I mean, I'll tell you a very funny thing. Recently, I saw an interview of KGF 2, the director. He uses very loud background score in KGF 2.
Right, yes.
When you asked this question, I loved his answer. Well, why do you use such, loud background? So he said, but I don't want to give a chance to the audience to talk when the film is going on. So I'd rather occupy that space. In a way, I could say the same for me, though it's not my idea what he said. Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember that the song, the Govinda Govinda chant from Sarkar was a huge rage. And I was thinking whether that
I'll tell you something very funny about that. I first made Mr. Bachchan listen to the Govinda Govinda theme in Sarkar. He looked at me as if I lost my head. In our film, where did Govinda come from? He said, I mean, you don't understand what the hell that line means. So I've never thought about it. Just because he asked me the question, I said, Sarkar is a kind of a Govinda, Sri Krishna kind of character. He has all these tricks up his sleeve and he doesn't let people know what he's thinking inside. And I thought that was the right representation of the soundtrack for your characters. Some nonsense I gave him, you know. In reality, that's a track I used in a Telugu film of mine called Govinda Govinda. The film's name with Nagarjuna and Sridevi. And I love that score so much. I was looking for an opportunity to put it once again out there. And that's the only reason I put it there.
That's an interesting answer.
Yeah.
RGB, while on Bachchan, I mean, we got to talk about Bachchan. In my opinion, some of Bachchan's best from Bachchan 2.0 phase, that is post mid-90s Bachchan. Some of the best work that he has done has arrived in films with you. I absolutely loved Nishabd. I like Sarkar. I loved the segment from Darna Zaruri Hai. I liked Run. And I also liked what you guys did with Babban in RGVKR. Probably I'm the only person who
possible,
But, with respect to Bachchan, you have really traversed the arc, haven't you? I mean, from being a fanboy to collaborating with him, to collaborating on some of the best work he has done. How do you look at that arc and that journey? That must be something really special.
Yeah, to start with, for me, Bachchan has been the only star act for me because the reason being, he was the only person in all the people I worked with so far, him and Sridevi, where I bought a ticket standing in line. Now, the other actors came along with me, whoever is popular now, I'm saying in the last 25 years, and I always looked up to him and I was mesmerized with him while sitting in the theater as a ticket buying audience. And I wanted to recreate that feeling when I was directing a film with him, But the point is, when I look back on the films which impressed me, I don't see him as good as what I thought it was. Because somewhere my application of my kind of a style on him created a terrific merger. And then uh, to challenge him with some expression, that you mentioned Nishabd, like one of the most, my favorite close-ups of his when he's just standing on the steps watching Aftab and Chia go
Yes,
away.
yes.
Yeah, I find it very difficult to believe or understand how he could come up with an expression like that. Because, see, the point is there is a context to Sarkar. It is an expected reaction. We have many films or roles like that which he can refer to. Nishabd is a very unusual film. I mean, a kind of a 60, 65-year-old man is falling in love and he's not able to control his feelings for a young girl who's old enough to be his daughter. I think that's a first of it. And so the complexity of Nishab's performance is far superior. I mean, far compared to a Sarkar. Sarkar would be technically a cakewalk for someone like Bachchan. Not so Nishad, you know?
Yes, yes. Would you say that's your best film with Bachchan in your
Yes,
eyes?
100%. Yeah.
And we'll talk more about Nishabd later on when we talk about the film. You have worked with Bachchan for so many years now. I mean, he's now well into his 80s. The guy is just like unstoppable. I mean, unstoppable. He just keeps on. And, from whoever I talk with, about
Mm.
Bachchan, from the filmmakers, writers, they say that he's still hungry to learn, do something different,
Yes.
to always try to better his last film. What are some of the things that you, I don't want to use the word learn, but what are some of the things that you observed while working with him for so many years
Yeah.
that absolutely stands out from the rest?
See, I mean, it's not true that he betters himself in the last film because the actors technically, they really don't have much control over the film. How it, he betters every shot. That is actual true contribution of a actor because it's pieces of shots which come together to make a scene. Of course, the scene has, the script to back up. If the story, if the scene is like an architectural model, what happens is bits and parts by the time it comes together, which can get screwed up in the editing sometimes, or which a co-actor's expression, a reaction can screw up a scene. There are too many factors which can spoil it. But an actor, you'll really know only in the shot between between action and cut. That is where you can see his mastery, because to retain the passion, the same passion he had ever since he first faced a camera till today, when he's in his 80s, I think that is something which I've not ever seen anybody doing that. Even in rehearsing, and he's the only man I know who knows how to stand. I know it sounds too simplistic. How
What
to
do you mean by
stand
that?
in a, like just the way he holds himself without any dialogue, his body language, or that for me, because that's coming into character. So you know a character from the body language, not so much from what he speaks, because what he speaks is a function of the content. But changing the body language, he brings in a character without even speaking of that, him saying a single line. And I can see that you can see that happening at the transformation right in the shot. That's where I get the maximum impressed with him. Yeah.
I see. So he's somehow like internalizing the character physically,
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Very
Yes.
interesting.
Yeah.
RGB, let's talk about Urmila a little bit. Urmila is one of the criminally underrated actors of my generation, in my opinion. You worked with her extensively across genres. From the perspective of a storyteller, a director, what was it about Urmila that was special and that was different from the other actors that led you guys to make so many films together?
Mm. See, I first met Urmila for a film called Antam, which was made in
Drohi,
two
right?
languages, called Drohi. Yeah. I frankly wasn't very, very impressed at that time. I just thought of her because I actually went to Mumbai to sign Madhuri Dixit for that film. Her dates were not available because she was very, very busy artist at the time. Okay. Then Nagarjuna's dates were there. I had to start. So just as a compromise, I first signed Urmila for Drohi. And even that, we finished the film not with much me thinking about her. I thought she was little loud in the context of that. That was my general impression, and even the critics were not very high on her when the film released. Then when I did a film called Gayam later, where again me and Mani collaborated on that, Maniratnam. So we wrote the script together, and the casting decisions, Mani said for that second role, I think Urmila might be interesting. In that contest, she even came. And by the time I had the script of Rangila with me, but not like a full-fledged, it was an idea I picked up, and I kind of narrated it to Sridevi. So the original cast of Rangila it's a South film with Nagarjuna and Sridevi. I'm planning to ask Rajinikanth for a special appearance of Jackie Shroff Road. That was actually the original idea of Rangila, Then when I was shooting a song,
and this is what time? Around 93 or so?
95.
94. Oh, okay. So 94, right? 95 Rangila
94.
came, right? Yeah.
Yes, correct. 94. We were supposed to shoot a song in Vizag, and the choreographer missed the train, which was supposed to come from Chennai, and the delay. And the producer had a long face because the whole unit was sitting without any work because the choreographer is absent. And then I asked Urmila, can you try to dance with yourself without a choreographer? So she did that. I said, try. And I was mesmerized the way she did. Because without a choreographer, what she was doing, she's going by herself. Whatever the dance makes her feel, she was feeling it. And that day when I was shooting, I decided if I ever make Rangila, it will be with her. That's how Rangila happened. Okay. And Rangila was mesmerized with her when I was shooting the songs and that kind of thing. The enormous trust she showed me. She was comes from a very conservative family. And then all the things when she was wearing this t-shirt, running in the beach, obviously she was feeling. At that time, I told her, my mom, when she watches a David Dhawan film with Karishma Kapoor, it had this crass lyrics and all that. She kind of makes a face. But when she sees Singing in the Rain, where the girls are wearing much less, and she feels very happy. So I thought it is not so much about what you think or what's happening, how the way they're projecting themselves creates the emotion in the audience. If the girl feels beautiful in a swimsuit, people also will take it like that. If she feels something icky about it, but she has to do it for commercial reasons, that hardness shows on the face. So I told Urmila, it's a pride. You have to take a pride in the beauty of your body. And then if you don't want to hide it, and if you do it with pride, it comes across beautiful to the audience. So this is still theory, but in practice, to do that in front of 100 people and behind the camera is, there you need immense trust in the filmmaker, which is what she gave me. So post that, because she's extremely expressive in her eyes, sometimes she tends to go a little loud, but that is okay because I know how much I want. So I can, if the speaker can have a very high decibel level, as long as I have the control to bring it down or push it up as required, you can do that. But if the decibel level is low, you can't pump it up. So I'd rather have a high decibel actor so that I can control the level of volume, Then, which made me do films like, a Satya character, for example, is a complete opposite of what she did in Rangila.
Absolutely,
that innocent,
right.
That everything. And then, of course, I find her performance in Daud far superior. Though the film did not do commercially well, Zahrila's song is one of my favorite performances of Urmila, And then, of course, Bhoot. To use someone so beautiful and so sexy in Rangila to scare the hell out of the audience was like a marked, deviation. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. And of course, you guys did Cone as well and Must.
Kaun, yeah, Ek Hasina Thi.
Ek Hasina Thi too. Yes, yes, absolutely. And we will talk about all of those movies. So let's start talking about the movies now, Archie. So, of course, we got to start with Shiva. And, I just have these notes, where I want to talk about the scenes and, just share whatever you can about these scenes. But in Shiva itself, the opening credits, with the live sounds of the traffic, the soundscape that you create, I think that's
Yeah,
something you carried into many of your other films as well, right? Where the movie
yeah,
opens with something similar. Top of my head, I
correct.
can think of Rangila and also Nach. I think Nach also opens like that, right?
Yes, even Shanakshanam. Yeah.
Yes, yes. What's the idea behind creating these soundscapes?
I mean,
Trying to set the tone.
yeah, I think, see, sound is something which I first noticed in this Western film called Mechanized Gold, which came in the late 60s or early 70s, I think. And I was mesmerized because I almost many times I used to close my eyes and just feel the soundtrack. I'm not even talking background score, just the sound, you know. And then there was Sholay, of course, which also had made tremendous use of sound effects and other films. The Exorcist, for instance, you know. So when it is real, the film is being treated realistically. I think sound plays a lot of role subconsciously, though many people might not be conscious about it. So then I would like to overemphasize on the importance of sound. So I always created a sequence, whether it's in Drohi or Shiva or wherever, to focus on that aspect, so that kind of helps you in sucking the audience into the world I'm trying to create in the context of the story or whatever. Yeah.
And then there's that beautiful scene, where Amla and Nagarjuna go to the movies. They have an argument, and she says, "Stop it!" And the movie playing on
Yeah.
the screen freezes frame. Amla
Yeah.
walks onto the screen stage and disappears behind the screen, only to reappear on the cinema screen. Where did you get that from?
Yeah, I mean, there's some things was very heavily into music videos at that time.
Right, that's what it
Watching
does feel
music
like.
video, yeah. So basically, because on a commercial film, the so-called mainstream commercial, it is inconceivable to make a film without songs. So as long as songs have to be there, I thought I'll do something not been seen before, you know. And this particular song, what you mentioned in the theater, that's a Janet Jackson song. I think it's called Control. You know, I picked up
Right,
the
right.
idea from there. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
right. Very interesting. But it's nicely done. I really love that.
Hmm.
And then there's this interesting thing you do in many of your movies, RGB, which I've always liked. You take an actor who has a certain image and put them in a scene or in a position which flies in the face of that image. So let me mention a few examples to explain what I mean.
Hmm.
In Shiva, someone so imposing, a person of power, a person with a deep voice, a politician like Goga Kapoor, finds himself completely helpless when unexpectedly, he's stabbed in cold blood by Raghavan.
Yeah,
Some other examples would be the fear on Bachchan's face in your Darna Zaruri Hai segment,
yeah,
where he's crouching behind a table and pointing to that
yeah, yeah,
person he keeps seeing in the
yeah,
room. Or the fear on Ajay Devgan's face when he sees Urmila possessed in Bhoot. Two actors with a very macho image finding themselves scared shitless.
yeah, yeah. See, and that's the point, because see, when a person who you think can't be scared looks scared, the fear becomes even more powerful and impactful. In fact, when I was talking to Ajay about Booth, because Ajay had such an action hero image at the time. So I was telling him, Ajay, even I am not sure how exactly fear should be seen in your face, given your image. But at that point of time, but Ajay was actually in the opposite. He said, Rama, the fear has to be real, no matter what. And I would look as scared as what you want me to look like, you know. At a point of time, I realized, see, one long time back, Subhash Ghai told me when he had a chat with Dilip Kumar on some set, he wanted him to cry because of something in the film. And Dilip Saab said, no, it won't look good if I cry. I mean, I will give you the effect of me crying, but don't let the audience see me crying. I don't think they like it. which is I think which is fair enough. And he did something which Subhashji said really worked. So now fear is of two things. Now, if Ajay slowly looks and you can see the fear growing in his eyes, that works in a certain level. It becomes horror. Now, I'm just giving an example. For example, someone like Rajkumar Rao, and he suddenly cries into, that almost gets into comedy. See, fear and horror, I think horror and comedy are very, very thin line in them, because many times in a horror film, you hear people laughing out of a release of tension, could be, or whatever they say. But I think any extreme emotion suddenly makes you laugh, So that's a very thin line of how you balance it. Now, Bachchan, because in Dharna Zaruriya, he almost was like that is what I call being naked in your emotion, absolutely uninhibited, and like particular shot, what you mentioned, when he hides behind the thing, I think, that's definitely one of his best work, I feel, especially given that he never was in that genre in his entire career. He never did a horror film so far, yeah.
Yes, for me personally, the scariest moments from that segment were not when he actually sees that man in the mirror, but it's when the close-ups of his face, Bachchan's face, because you are seeing what he's seeing through the expressions on his face, and that kind of scared you. That kind of scared me a lot. Moving on to Raat, RGV, the scene at the movie theater, it's a classic scene where Revati finds herself deserted all alone. And the final kicker, where she sees herself seated in the manager's office. Talk a little bit about that scene.
Yeah, see, I love to create those moments, in terms of, I love nightmares, for example, They come out of the blue in your sleep and they create strange scenarios, and you see people in expressions which they're different, which you've never seen, or you see strangers in some space, and you actually see different places. How the hell can the mind can conjure a completely new thing which we have never seen before is one of the biggest mysteries for me, So I think as a sequence, it's like a short film if you look at it, that whole theater segment, And the fact of you feeling lonely in where you're not supposed to. A theater is supposed to have people, and suddenly when the camera zooms out to see the whole theater empty, those films, I had my early influences of horror films right from Doctor's Terror's House of Horrors, which I saw as a kid, and where this is one train. When someone gets down in a station, the whole station is empty without a single soul, and as he walks. So that could be one of the very early influence when Revati gets down from the bus in the opening sequence, that nobody's there, So I think I like to subject the audience to situations or places where they've been there, they know it, but something like this to happen there. So if I did the same thing, whether you take a Bhoot or a Raat, if that's happening in a house on a haunted hill, which is expected, in a graveyard, which is expected, but in Bhoot, in the middle of Lokhandwala, like in an apartment is haunted, is something which no one will expect. Likewise, the theater sequence in Raat. Yeah.
Right, and that way the fear is much more amplified.
Yes.
Let's talk about Rangila. Well, first of all, the title, the Rangila, in many ways it's about Millie, isn't it? We're talking more about her, aspirations to live a full life, that's full of colors and everything. So it's more about her. And, again, I like how, of course, Amir is great and Jackie Shroff is great, but it's really about that middle class, Mumbai girl who's, full of dreams and who wants to do this. Was that part of the idea behind the title of Rangila?
See, when we started, in fact, we started shooting without really having a title. We were still thinking about it. And I was thinking of various, I wanted to sound happy, which was unlike any of the films I've done before Rangila.
Right.
And we're trying out with this, and we thought of something as cheesy as love also at a point of time, something as basic as that. And I remember me and Amir were walking in this hotel called Holiday in Hyderabad, We both are walking in the lobby and we are just bouncing titles. What about this? What about this? And I suddenly, out of the blue, without anything, I said Rangila, you know. And as I was walking, he didn't respond. So I turned and he was not there. So I turned back and he just stopped in his tracks. He said, what did you say? He said, I said, Rangila. That's it, he said. You know? And immediately we could feel a vibe so strong, we didn't even think about anything. But I have to tell you something very funny. When I tried to register the title, it was already taken by someone who registered the title. And you can't guess for what film. It's for a Mithun Chakravarti action film. They took Rangila. Someone booked Rangila as a title. I thought, what on earth? Why would a Mithun Chakravarti, especially the kind of films he used to make at that time? He used to make those films in that Mudumalai resort. All these cheap B-grade action films, So then I used some contacts in the industry I had at that time to try to get to the producer. And because the film is not being shot, he just registered the title to shoot it later. I requested him to give me the title. And that's how I got the title. And today I can't imagine a Mithun Chakravarti film called Rangila. And I can't imagine Rangila without that title.
Well said.
Imagine if you call it love or something, I'm not very sure it worked so well. I can't believe that.
No, that sounds very 80s. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about the music, Marjorie? Did you expect the music of Rangila to become what it eventually became? Essentially, a generational
I'm not sure I expected, but you see, when I first heard Roja's songs, I was zapped with not so much the songs. I'm not a huge fan of Roja's songs, those. But the soundtrack, in terms of the BGMs, what you call, the track sounds.
The production of it, right?
Yeah. The production of it is something which zapped me. Never heard anything like that, Especially Rukmini song, So that is what which actually made me want him, Rahman. Now, interestingly, I actually started a film called Nayak at that time. And Sanjay Dutt got arrested in the bomb blast case, So the producers were more keen on Nayak because Sanjay Dutt was a big star at that time. And Rangila, Amir was not big. And Urmila had 3-4 failures. And all this was happening at this front. So when I suggested Rahman's name for Rangila, they were very reluctant. They thought we'll get Anu Malik for you, we'll get so-and-so for you. And I said, no, I don't want anyone except Rahman. So initial reactions, many times even I wasn't sure about, like Hairama's song, I was extremely doubtful when he gave me the tune, because he's one of the guys, he's the only guy, music director I know, he doesn't try to impress the filmmaker, where all the others do that. So on a very basic rhythm, something like that, he sang like that. I thought, what the fuck is this? The reference I had is the Kate Nahi Katti song in Mr. India. That's what I made him listen.
Oh, wow.
I want a song like this, I said, and he gave this. I thought he sent to me from Chennai this particular tune. And I said, Rahman, I think by mistake you sent me something else. No, I sent it for you only, he said. Are you sure? But I heard it, I thought it was something. And I was too much in awe of Rahman at that time. So I thought that is one part. And second part, Rahman is notorious for his delays. He takes so much of time. And if I say no to this, by the time he gives me the next tune, I don't know what will happen. So I decided to take a chance. But when I heard the production, I was sapped. I was something never heard in my life, what he did with that song. So that's how the thing happened. And I was so motivated to shoot the song so well, partly because of Rema, partly because of Urmila. You know, to capture her beauty and with the aid of a sound created by Rahman was like a once in a lifetime opportunity, I thought. Yeah.
What were your references for the song picturizations, RGV? Because that was also unlike
Uh,
anything you had done
See,
before.
I was very heavily influenced by Singing in the Rain and
Right,
Sound of Music and all the 60s and 70s musicals of Hollywood. You know,
right.
that played a very large part in the shooting of Rangila, because a scene almost becoming a song becoming a scene. It is driving from a situation. It is not coming out of the blue. For example, like Shiva. Yeah.
I had Pankaj Parashar on the podcast, some time ago, and he told me that you told him that his song "Dekho Dekho Ye Hai
Chalbaz.
Jala," uh,
Chalbaz.
Jalwa, Jalwa.
किसी की हाथ ना आएगी ये लड़की. No, see, there is a song
Yes, yes.
in Chalbaz.
Oh, okay. He said, okay. I thought it was the "Dekho Dekho Ye Jalwa" shot in Goa, where Archana
No, no, no,
Singh
no,
is
no, no.
dancing
No,
by
no,
the
no, no.
coast. No, okay.
The Chalbaz song, that was one of my most favorite songs. Yes, yes, yeah.
Right, right, right. You are, of course, a Sridevi fan. Yes.
Mhm.
Satya turns 25 next
Yeah.
month, RGB, and absolutely milestone film. Just not just of 90s, but just in general.
Mm.
You made a film called Drohi, with Nagarjun and
Yeah.
Urmila in 1992. That movie did not work. So 6 years later, you make a similar story about a gangster,
Yeah.
who's in love with a girl, but he can never exit from the world of crime and settle with the
Yeah.
girl he loves. That movie was, of course, Satya. What do you think went wrong with Drohi and you got
Mm.
right in Satya? Because it's essentially the same story, right?
See, actually, I this was taken from a James Hadlich's novel called "My Laugh Comes Last." In that there's one small segment of a character, which is not really the main story of the book. I took that as an inspiration for Drohi. But when in the whole point of making it, like it can happen to many filmmakers, even many films of mine, you lose track sometimes, you know. And in that process is how I screwed up Drohi. you know. But when I went back to read that, it was so arresting, and I was so upset with myself that how could I screw this up, you know. And then I just kind of revamped it and created new characters and changed the atmosphere and made it again into Satya. You know, so that's the story of My Love Comes Last, basically. So I think the seriousness with which you take the characters and the subject matter is which is one of the most important things. And sometimes you become non-serious. I mean, eventually, I'm not trying to justify the failures I made, and how it happens also is many times not, you're not conscious about it. No one deliberately wants to make a bad film because you're putting so much of time and effort. The audience are putting just 2 hours of watching time, so you will be much more careful and much more wanting to do your best. But when you lose track, you won't be conscious about it. That's what I'm trying to say. So I would say, when coming back to your question, what do you think? Well, I think I was very, very serious in Satya, because part of it is not just because I revisited My Love Comes Last. It is also because at that time there was a heavy underworld presence in Bombay.
Right.
Every day we were hearing things about people getting shot and killed, and there was atmosphere of fear. And I happened to meet some of the gangsters, and it was a new world. I was fascinated with it. I was like a kid in a toy shop. To capture them as characters was something which motivated me a lot. So I would think that will be the main reason.
There's so much of Shiva, the character, in the character of Satya. They both are actually very emotional people, but their projection is anything but that. They seem cold without much show of emotion.
Mm,
I'm guessing that comes from your fondness for Fountainhead and
yes,
Howard
yes.
Rourke. Both stand up to things even when the odds are against
Yeah,
them. What
you
it
said it. Yeah, you
sorry?
said it. You
Yes,
are
yes, yes.
absolutely right. Because I was
Okay.
very fascinated with Howard Rock's character in Fountainhead, and invariably he will seep into any of the films I make, including Sarkar. Yeah.
Do you still love that novel as much as you did it years ago?
Yes, I do. Not that I reread it again, but I think many of its basic thing, what influenced me, they influence me even now. So I would like to believe yes.
RGV, remember that scene in Goodfellas where Tommy is killed,
Yeah,
Joe Pesci?
yeah,
I always think about that scene when I see Biku's death in
that,
Satya.
yes,
Both are sudden, unexpected deaths. Both are
yeah,
shot dead on a seemingly big day. Tommy thinks that he's going to be a made man, and
yeah.
Biku has just got Bhau elected, which was his goal. And their closest, Jimmy and Kalumama, are massively blindsided, right? They're not in on it. Is that a coincidence or is that a homage?
See, I mean, for me, definitely Joe Pesci's death in Goodfellas was one of the most impactful scenes I've seen. When I was shooting Bikku Matre's death, I don't consciously remember thinking of that. But though Tommy's death was highly impactful, and I was not really a big fan of Goodfellas compared to Godfather, for instance. But the fact that many of the murders which happen in real life underworld also, of many I were hearing about how so and so was killed and made to believe nothing will happen. So there were some real time things I heard at that time from the people who know about the underworld or who are a part of the underworld. I think that kind of influenced me more than this particular scene.
I see. Okay. So this
Yeah.
was based on the stories that you were hearing from those people that you met.
Yes. Yeah.
Gotcha. And the title of the film is a nod to Art Satya. You had mentioned that your girlfriend was also
Yeah.
named Satya.
She's
So that.
not my girlfriend. She was a girl I loved.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But besides that, RGV, was there a
Huh.
bit of Velankar of Ardha Satya and Khandilkar of Satya?
I would think, Adhasati has also been a very influential film for me.
Right,
You know,
right.
I would like to think, yeah, yes, yeah. But this particular scene, when he explains to the officers, Khandalkar, about why he is doing what he's doing, that is a straight lift from Gandhi when General Dyer talks to the committee about the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. I just copied that scene exactly the way it is. Yeah. Hmm.
And I love the cut from Chandar being shot to a greening Amod Shukla, soaking in the accolades for cleaning up the town. I thought that's a
Yeah.
very effective cut because, now Shukla, who up until now was a decent, likable law and order professional in my eyes, suddenly starts to look like a villain to me
Yeah.
because, my sympathies lie with Chandar.
Yeah. See, when I was, there is a place called Barachal in South Bombay, where I happened to meet this one guy who belongs to the Gauli gang. So he has this fascination for Gauli, like he all the time used to talk about Gauli bhai ka haath hai mere sar pe, Gauli bhai ye hai, Gauli bhai wo hai. He's just obsessed with Gauli and he has no identity for himself. It's complete belief. So he's a gangster, technically speaking, but he was such a cute, lovable guy. So that is where I picked up Chanda's characterization from. So when that guy was killed, maybe a month after I met by the police. Now suddenly the police become, "Arey, that was such a nice guy. Why would anybody kill him?" Is what my first instinct was. You know. Now on Gauli's order, he could have killed people also, which I don't know at that point of time. I'm not aware of it. So for me, though he's technically a gangster, is the most lovable guy I met. So as it is, I copied that entire reality segment into this. So though Paresh Rawal's character, he also has, he's doing a job, and when he tells, are you going to go? Yes, mistakes will happen. We can't be perfect all the time. We're human beings too. That justifies his character. When he just says that, by the time he goes out. But see, in reality, it's very rare it can happen that a police officer will be shot by a gangster. It doesn't happen. Extremely rare, no. So,
That's
but
because
at
they have a
that
certain
time,
code, or
not a code, because see, Underworld is eventually a business operation, and they don't kill as much as what we imagine to be. They keep getting people who are in the way, things like that. But they're heavily dependent upon the business people, on the other people, the underworld, So when something like this happens, the police will take it very, very seriously. Many of their members are shot, and they can make life miserable for them. So that's too expensive. In fact, if this even in Godfather, when Captain Solojo is killed, you know. So I mean, there's a very, very heavy retaliation from the police's side because their identity gets threatened as an organization, you know. But precisely because they did it, the fact that he took that decision is how dearly they all paid. The death of all the people actually can be traced back to the death of Amar Shukla, in the context. Yeah.
and Satya is of course a gangster movie, but at one level, Satya is also a Mumbai movie, right? In the
Mm.
sense that this is a story of an outsider, like so many, who arrive in Mumbai with their loneliness. They form relationships in a new city with strangers. And it just happens that one such outsider, Satya, happens to get attached to the crime world.
Yeah.
But this could have been a story about, just this guy working in a mill or somewhere else as well. So it's also really a city story,
Yeah.
which I think a lot of people may, perhaps not too many people talk about because, it's such a huge gangster landmark film.
Yeah.
But I always saw this as, and this is interesting for me because you mentioned you have worked with, Mani Ratnam a lot. You
Mm.
co-wrote Thiruda, correct?
See, to tell you the truth, he never took any of my ideas. I never took any of his ideas. He just happened to be friends. We just put our names as co-screenplay writers, but the truth is, his style is very different. My is very different, and
Right.
yeah,
But the reason I brought that up is because, in many of Mani Ratnam's films, it's about an outsider coming, in environments that are, not his own, like, right from Nikon or anything like that. So, I thought that was kind of interesting when it came to Satya, because it's also essentially a story of an outsider who comes to Mumbai.
yeah. But even Shiva, for that matter, an outsider
Yes.
comes. Yeah.
Yes,
See,
absolutely.
that actually, that inspiration for me goes from Bruce Lee's films.
Yes.
Bruce Lee's films, he comes from somewhere into somewhere else, and right from the Return of the Dragon,
Right.
even to Enter the Dragon or Fist of Fury, yeah.
Right. Way of the
So I was
Dragon.
quite influenced, yeah.
Yes. Did you give references to Sandeep Chowta for the background music in Satya?
No.
Okay.
In fact, I first met Sandeep Chauta when he heard from newspaper reports that I was planning to make a gangster film. The Satya theme he composed and made me hear it, which is the reason I took him for the film. So that was completely his original, yeah.
I see. Yeah. Again, the reason I asked you is because that scene where Bhikkhu and the gang are ambushed at Malhotra's site. The background music for that action scene is very similar to a great background music from A Better Tomorrow, John Woo's film. And it's a very similar kind of situation as well. There too, Ho's crew is ambushed and they start running through the fields after a drug deal goes wrong. And I always loved that background music. And I always thought, I have heard this somewhere before, but I could never put my finger on it.
And as well, I can't speak for Sandeep if he's
Yes.
taken inspiration from there. But to my knowledge, entire Satya score was very original.
Let's move on to Company. RGB, those 7 minutes from Company, where Malik and Chandu first take out Anis and Saeed, then Rathore and Sharma. They intimidate Gadgir and then telegraph Aslam Bhai that essentially they're taking over the syndicate. Those 7 minutes are my favorite 7 minutes from the entire RGB crime canon. for me.
Okay.
I love those 7 minutes. And, I wanted to talk about the scenes in that. So let's start with the great scene where Malik and Chandu are waiting for Anis and Saeed in the car. And that's a great scene.
See, for me, I mean, one thing which is fascinating for me about the underworld, the way I understand, is see, murder happens for reasons. I mean, either it can be for revenge, it can be an emotional loss of control, an impulse, or it can be for I mean, the existence of a person is a problem. So where there's no emotion, you have something, you need to take that out, you know. So Ajay Devgan not at all having an expression neither of anger nor out of any personal enmity towards Anis and Saeed, but their existence is a problem. It needs to be taken care like a solution. So the analogy I had at that point of time was like a doctor giving an injection when he just lifts his left arm and puts the barrel against his chest like a doctor would inject. You know, a doctor doesn't. He's doing it for the betterment, you know, of whatever the problem is, to kill the infection or whatever the reason is doing, you know. So the complete lack of any emotional thing is what I think is why it was so effective, and which again comes in Vivek. Vivek is more connected to the audience, where Malik looks like he's he's a demon. And demon not as in violence, that the fact that no one can do something like that with such blank expression, absolutely not feeling the thing. So people have to work themselves up to create something like that. So the fact is so much in control, he looks so much more larger than life because of that. And that is what defines his character as Malik. Yeah.
Right. And there is a great...
So for me, the most important thing is what is said about that. The doctor giving an injection, that is the analogy I gave to Ajay when I shot that. Yeah. So as long as you have to kill, let's kill in the best way possible. That's the whole point. You know?
Yeah. Right. The lesser of the two evils, right? Yeah. And then that scene, where Chandu and Malik finish off Sharma and Rathod. And again, now this, I don't know if this is again coincidence or homage, but that scene is very reminiscent of Tony and Manny taking out Frank and Mel in Scarface. Yeah, and even that Ernie bit is very similar to Gadgir, where he says, "Make it काम करेगा." And Scarface, he says, "Ernie, you want a job?" So I don't know if that again is subconscious or this is like part of the.
I would say for me the most influential film for me in my entire growing years was The Godfather. Not so much Scarface, not so much like I said Goodfellas, And technically these things, like even if the shooting of Solojo also, I mean the fact Solojo brings in Captain McCluskey as a protection. And no one expected the Captain McCluskey to be killed by Michael Corleone, And Scarface, I always felt it's a very mainstream masala kind of film. So I never took those two films so seriously, except for probably some sequences. And so killing of this guy, in fact, the line in Godfather said, no one will have the guts to kill a police officer, The arrogance comes from there. So Solojo thought it's impossible that Michael Corleone will do anything in the presence of a police captain, So I was more influenced by that in the context. Yeah.
And how do you look back on Company? I mean, I absolutely love this film as well. Satya is, where people always talk about Satya more, but I think Company is just as good. And, I just thought Company was more structured than Satya. But what do you think?
I would say, yeah. So I think Satya is more realistic in the context of the characters and the emotions that are much more relatable for a general audience. Company is a very top end. I mean, it's more nearer to Godfather, I would think. Like I love this one line of Scorsese when he said, the Godfather movies are like mythological movies. There's nothing real about them. But I think that is beside the reason why it makes such a big impact compared to even Goodfellas, So Company when I look back on it now, I don't find it that interesting. Partly the reason is because I understand the underworld now much more than when I made Company. So when I look at it in that perspective, I feel it's too mild and not, I wouldn't say fake, but I think it's not realistic enough for me post, what I learned in the last 15 years about the underworld compared to when I made it at that time.
Can you give an example of any particular element from the story?
For example, let us say when Malik and Chandu part ways, and I know now the actual reason how it happened between Daud Ibrahim and Chota Rajan. Compared to the real life thing, I find this very, very childish, what I showed in Company. Everything is in comparison. You only make, you believe in something based on what you know at that point of time. So I feel it's far more complex and far more interesting, the real story of Daud Ibrahim and Chota Rajan split, which I plan to make someday.
That would be great, yeah.
Yeah.
That brings us to Mast, a fun fantasy film. In the last scene, we see a picture of Rekha inside Dilip Tahil's closet. And basically it drives home how all of us are essentially Dilip Tahil. We have all had our crushes
we have
on
some
stars.
actress.
Yeah. And fantasies about film stars. And they only remain that, fantasies, while for Aftab, his fantasy actually transpired. His fantasy was realized.
Yes.
And how much of this is your fascination and fandom for Sri Devi?
Yeah, it is definitely that. In fact, mentioned in many interviews even at the time
Yes.
of the release of Mast. Yeah.
A very interesting film. Very interesting film. And again, a great soundtrack. I think you guys did a lot of different things. In fact, I think that was one of the earlier recreations, like Pucho Na Yaar Kya Hua and everything. So that was very interesting.
Yeah. Incidentally, that was the debutant film of Sunidhi Chauhan also.
Yes. Sunidhi's debut. Absolutely. Yes. And RGV then Kaun. Was Kaun the most stress-free film to make? I'm guessing that it must have been just like four of you.
Yeah, it's probably, I shot that in a period of 15 to 16 days in a place near Panvel. That is something just over dreams me and Saurabh Shukla. Anurag were talking, and someone told me about a play, actually. Either a Gujarati or a Marathi play, I'm not very sure about that. So that is what I said, we can make it into a film. The play was completely different, but I thought we just put someone in a situation and play around to see what we'll do. There's no proper script. We kept on improvising the lines, and many times I was telling Manoj and Urmila to do what they feel like at any given point of time. It was literally having fun kind of a thing more than anything else. Yeah.
It does feel like it. It does feel like you guys had fun while making that. You and Bajpayee have made some terrific films. But what was the absolute zenith of RGV directs Manoj Bajpayee? Bajpayee and Kaun dancing and singing Gumnaam Hai.
Yeah.
That's, I think, your best work.
Yeah. That is something I was telling him about Clockwork Orange. Malcolm McDowell, it does that.
Right. Yes, absolutely.
Anecdote film. Yeah.
And then I think he also sings "Unbreak My Heart."
Yeah.
That's absolutely hilarious. And let's talk about Nach, RGV. I love this film. It's probably one of your most underrated movies. When a particular movie does not work, do you believe in doing a post-mortem, or is that a futile exercise?
No. Because I think over the years, my belief is that films are destined to become whatever they become. I think the same film, you see it a certain time, it creates a certain reaction, and the same film some other time creates a different reaction. When people expect, like for example, when I made Run, a distributor made a very interesting comment. 5 days before the release, he told me that it is not going to work. So I asked him, why do you say that? So you created Sarkar. the kind of power in Amitabh Bachchan's eyes, and now you're making him do Namaste and with tears in his eyes. So I would have never taken Sarkar into consideration while making Run, because Run is a different film. But what he says makes absolute sense, because audience have seen Amitabh Bachchan in Sarkar before that. They don't want to see a lesser character in the next film in a collaboration. So I think Naach's failure was partly because of Rangila. If I'm making another female-centric film in the terms of that and calling it with a title like Naach, which is reminiscent of Rangila, and then having the dark, serious approach to it based on the characters of Reva, and I think that's what I believe. So there's no point postmortem, because you will try to learn from your old mistakes, but you'll make fresh mistakes. Yeah. So there's no point. I think you have to go with the flow, and probably someone sometimes might check on you, and you might luckily realize before the deed is done. But once what is done is done. So I'm too busy doing my next film by the time. Yeah.
Right. And like I said, I love this film, except the ending. Perhaps, do you think the ending, it shouldn't have been a happy ending? They should have gone their own ways.
Maybe. Yeah. I would think so. Yeah. I agree.
And is there a reason why you made it a happy ending?
Not really. In fact, we debated that. Kind of just that, and after that, for some reason, opted for this. But even at that time, I was very much in two minds.
Oh, we forgot to talk about Daud. Another film that I like quite a bit. It's funny as fuck. I mean, but I think again, this did not work at the box office, right?
No.
But Pinky.
That is a strange part. The strange part is when film doesn't work, and you think maybe it's bad, and then I keep hearing people saying I loved it. Now, why they didn't like it at that time? Same thing I hear about Naach.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And
I recently met a teenage girl, maybe she's around 19 or something, and she told me her favorite film is Nishabd. Now, why would Nishabd came around 15 years back, or maybe more? And why would a girl who's not even maybe born or 5-year-old at that time loves Nishabd of all the films? And when she's not even in the zone of understanding Amitabh Bachchan's character, how a old man would feel about being in love with a young girl. So I think that's very strange. So even one person likes what I made, when the whole world did not see or did not like it, it will still confuse you, which means someone out there got the point, got it. So that's one more reason why you shouldn't go back and analyze.
Yeah, in Daud, I mean,
Daud,
the humor is totally unhinged.
Yeah, no, I'll tell you, when we were making it, and when one of my most favorite lines and reactions is actor Sushant Singh.
Yes.
Not Sushant Singh Rajput. I'm talking about
yes, the guy from Satya.
Yeah, he told me he and his wife went to watch Daud, and the film is going on. Somewhere in the middle of second half, he suddenly turned to the wife and said, "Hey, this is a comedy." He realized it's a comedy in the middle of second half, apparently. And I always say this, I told Manoj also, the main reason for the failure of Daud is Manoj Bajpayee, because he took his role so seriously, so people got confused between whether to take the film seriously or not. So at sometimes you fail to create the mindset for the audience how to watch it. That's where the film failed, I think, because it doesn't explain why they like it so much now. Like even Mr. Bachchan keeps saying is one of my favorite film of his is Daud, for him also.
Yes, it's a fun ride. It's a fun ride.
Yeah.
And is it true that you locked in Manoj for Bhikkhu Matre while shooting for this film?
Yes, that's true.
Okay. I read.
But I loved the seriousness with which he takes the role, and that is the time I actually committed to him that I'm going to make this film called Satya. Yeah.
Who did you have anybody else in your mind before for Bhikkhu Matre?
No, not really. I was just going to start casting at that time.
Moving on to Bhoot, RGV. I love the first few minutes of the film. Some of the very first things that we see in the very first few minutes of the film: the kitchen loft, the mirror, the staircase, the lift. All the places and things which we are going to have, which are going to play a key role throughout the film. It's very nicely set up, and that's part of the fun of watching Bhoot again and again, because you keep on seeing these things. And it seems like a script that went through quite a few reiterations and drafts. How accurate is that?
Not really. In fact, my belief about a horror film is that it shouldn't have too much of a story. It should have moments of scare. In fact, I remade Raat. Nobody noticed it. I just changed the father and daughter into husband and wife, and I made the same film once again.
Yes.
I do that quite often, actually. So for me, a horror film, I think, just to give those scares every once in a while, I think is, in fact, when you try to tell a story, it actually defeats the purpose then because fear is an emotion. You don't need a progression, except for the story should help create the moments. The story is not important. In fact, the boring part of Booth could be the last 15 minutes when you try to tell a story and give the reason behind why this seems to be happening. The best moments in Booth for anyone are when you see the Manjeet under the staircase, or Urmila near the mirror, or things like that. Yeah.
But now explain me that, because if there isn't a story, then what's holding your interest? It's just a series of jump scares.
I'm not saying there's no story. I'm saying if you look at the most successful horror films of all time in Hollywood also, you take Exorcist. There's no story at all. Take Paranormal Activity series. It's just like a premise. It's just an idea of the Blair Witch Project.
It's essentially a two-line story, right?
Yeah, something strange happens. It's just a premise. It's like 4 students went into the woods in Maryland. Months later, the footage was found. We actually don't. In fact, I remember Ridley Scott, the director of Alien, said, when you see something strange, you experience the emotion. And often, if you know the reason for that, you might lose the fear. That defeats the horror film purpose. Yeah.
You worked with Nana Patekar and Seema Biswas in this, two tremendous actors, and they both have very quirky roles. What was it like working with these two actors in Booth?
See, Nana's got a very, very strong face, which I just love to see his close-ups on the screen. It's probably arresting, So I thought, like I said already somewhere in this interview, there's a slight sense of humor in both the characters, just in the body language and the way he talks. The fact like Seema Biswas is a throwback to these oldie black and white films where there's some weird Mali will be there in the garden and things like that,
Right, spooky gardener.
Like Bo County and, Kohara and all that, So I think that's where it came from. And I believe in developing, something in the body language of a character, not to be straight at all. So Nana, the way he sits in the chair, the way he speaks at the door and things. And then in the climax, you see the fear in his face,
And Urmila's performance, again, it's a very tough act to do, that of a possessed person.
That's because it's very intense. Eyes carry so much of expression. Like when I mentioned that she tends to be loud, but that worked a lot in Booth because it's not easy to give that strong an expression. She sees Manjeet and her eyes literally seem, Yeah.
And did you ask her to watch Exorcist or Linda Blair's performance for this? Was that a reference? Or?
I did. Yeah.
And she did such a great job because, most actors would have come across as funny, but she really gives you the creeps and shivers.
If you don't do that with conviction, it's bound to come across as funny. Yeah, correct.
Yes. And now Nishabd, RGV, we started talking about this. This is such a great film, and since we were already talking about this just a few minutes ago, I think it came a few years too early. Perhaps
Mm.
you should reboot it again with SRK or someone.
Yeah.
Because it's a great film. I love this film. Was Bachchan initially reluctant to play the role of an older man in love with a much younger woman?
Not really, because he was excited about the possibilities of what kind of a performance he can give. We had like when we were about to shoot, his makeup man mentioned they will never accept you in a role like this. So there were apprehensions. Even Jayaji also said, considering the image Mr. Bachchan has, just as a thought, him getting attracted to a very young girl was creating some kind of a distaste in some people, you know. But him as an actor and me as a filmmaker were more excited about the possibility of what kind of a story we can tell in the context of this. Yeah.
And what was the germ of idea for this? I mean, yes, it's sure it's like Lolita, but I mean,
Yes.
why did you want to make this particular film with Bachchan?
Definitely, Lolita was the inspiration because,
Yes.
I'm especially the Adrian Lyons version, not so much the Kubrick version. I was fascinated with that.
And why did you choose Bachchan? Because you just thought that no other actor would do justice to it.
Yeah, definitely. Because the whole point of that with the man like Bachchan's image, the fact that he could not control his feelings, it was very arresting for the audience to see Bachchan go through those kind of feelings. Even till today, I can't imagine anyone else probably doing something like that.
So, Sarkar, when Zakir Hussain, comes to see Bachchan, that's such a banger of a scene. It's a key scene from the film. But I love it because it's probably the first RGV vintage Bachchan moment. You know what I mean? It's the first time we saw Bachchan do his vintage Bachchan of 70s thing, so to speak, in a RGV film. Actually, there is a scene before that, I think, where he lashes out at KK Menon at the dining table, and he just kind of does that. So that's definitely there. But, this particular scene, tell us more about this scene.
I always believed when generally the film industry's belief is that to someone to come and create or do a warning to someone like Bachchan, that guy needs to be, of substantial image. But I felt that on the contrary, what will work is a completely unknown person. An unknown person coming and talking like that scares you because it leaves to the imagination of the power of that man. Whereas a known person will have some baggage in other roles and films he has done. So you'll watch the performance. Whereas with a guy like Rashid, you will take him as a real person. In fact, he can sit like that in front of Bachchan and take his own time at the menacing eyes, his walk. And I saw him in a very, very brief role in Ek Hasina Thi. That's where I picked up Rashid from.
Yes.
Very before you might not even notice him there.
Yes.
So So when he's a theater actor, so when I asked him this, he asked me what is my role. He wanted to do some background work on that. I said, I don't want to know who you are. That is the whole point of this scene. Because many times filmmakers and actors get into this trap of doing background research. In effect, what that does is you do that in the discussion room and you get trapped into that. See, we have an impression on people many times when we just meet them for the first time. We don't know his background. So in cinema, the characters suddenly come. When they suddenly come, you know him only from that time. So you might as well not know even as a filmmaker who that guy is. I think that will create the maximum effect, at least in places like what you're talking about, Rashid's character in Sarkar. So when he gets down from the car and he walks, and I'm giving him so much of footage, though he's not a star or anything, he's not a known person. But by giving that much of importance, the audience also take him very seriously, because you are taking him seriously. That's how I think it works.
Right.
Yeah.
And how crucial was it to the story to cast, Abhishek as Subhash Nagar's son? Do you think it would add to the on-screen dynamic of father and son by casting Abhishek?
I did feel that. I definitely felt that, because especially, I mean, if suppose, let us for 1 second assume Bachchan Abhishek was not there in the film, someone else was there. I'm not saying it won't work, because it worked in Godfather. There is no relationship between Al Pacino and Marlon Brando. You know.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, it really comes through, in that scene where Abhishek decides to stay back after his father is framed for Anupam Kher's murder. And
Correct.
Abhishek holds his father's hand and lends support. I think that really hits doubly hard because of their, off-screen relation.
Yes.
RGB, not a love story. I like how you made this like a horror film, which makes perfect sense because it's about an absolutely horrific act. But it's one of your movies, which for me is a straight out horror film. I mean, I wouldn't call this a drama, or you could argue even horror films are drama. But was that intentional? I mean, is that how you looked at the story, which is inspired by true events?
See, for me, I was when I read news reports about that particular murder, what horrified me was that they had sex with when the dead body was lying there. Now, for me, that what struck me was, once you commit the act, then it just becomes a point of your mental state. How long are you going to be in that state, and at what point of time you get bored, or what point of time you're looking for a diversion. There are too many things which 3 days, if they were there, they would have eaten, they probably visited the bathroom, and they took a bath or whatever, all those activities, because the body becomes incidental after some time, because you got over the emotion. Then what else do you do? And a man and a woman are in that situation, trapped in that house with their body. So to see them as people, to see them as normal people in the context of a murder, I felt that would be very, very effective, which is what my thought was.
And when you make a film like this on something that is so horrific, obviously, you're vested into the subject matter when you're making this. I thought that Not a Love Story is so realistic in certain portions. Is it really hard to snap out of that space? Because when you want to recreate that whole horror, you really need to immerse yourself into that situation.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, at the end of the day, when you get back home, you need to snap yourself out of it.
I would like to think that process happened to me before I started making the film. In the context of just to imagine myself in that kind of a state. Once I actually started filming, it was more to do with to get the performance, just try to exactly what will be the expression when they kill, or the immediate aftermath, and then to see them carrying the body parts in plastic bags down the staircase. And I think that is more in the mind rather than in actually when filming it or during the course of filming. Because pretty much I was very sure about what exactly I wanted to do. I met the cops who interrogated that girl when she was caught, and
What was that experience like?
Yeah, see, this particular cop questioned her for nearly 4 to 5 days, at various stages. And just to see a person, because she's not done any crime before. The guy has not done any crime before, but they were just caught. It's like, they almost look like victims themselves in spite of them murdering. You know, now I could see that sympathetic streak even in interrogating officer when he questioned her. It doesn't happen interrogations many times. It don't happen like you see in films, like beating them up and things like that. They play upon the mind more than anything else. And finally made her confess. Yeah.
Very interesting. RGB, you made many shorts as well. I watched a couple of them, which I always found striking. Thriller and Naked, and
Yeah.
for me, they play like grindhouse sexploitation films of the 70s. Is that something you were experimenting with, like sexploitation films? That would play in the US in the
Mm.
grindhouse of 1970s.
I mean, not consciously, because both those films were made in the COVID time, and so we had nothing to do, and and I can't keep my hands off the camera. So to do in a limited space, I just thought of this story and made it like naked. Literally, I shot it with my cell phone, and the cost of the entire film, I think, was 2,000 rupees. You know.
And these were just released on YouTube, right?
Yes, 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 yes.
Because obviously the cinemas were closed at that time. And I remember, back in 2000s with The Factory, you produced a number of films belonging to different genres on small budgets. Something that Blumhouse
Yeah,
would do with horror some
yeah,
years later. You kind of did that, with Hindi films. And I still remember that you had mentioned that you were aiming for a factory release every Friday. Um,
yeah.
how do you look back on that experiment?
I
What
mean,
was
the context, I mean, I said that, but that was said half in fun. I mean, I said it in an answer to the question that how many films can you make? I mean,
right,
I
right.
want to do it every Friday if it's possible. And I was giving, I was making films with a lot of new people at that time as directors, because, that's where Aptak Chappan to all these films came at that time. Yeah.
And was that something that was commercially viable? That
Yeah, it
experiment?
was.
Oh,
It
okay.
was.
Let's talk about your new office. So you have you're calling it RGB Den, right?
Yeah.
And you have a great video. You sent me the video. I watched that video.
Yeah.
It looks grand. The one thing that's striking about it are the huge posters that you have on the
Yes.
walls inside. There's
Yeah.
Nagarjuna, there's Urmila, there's Bachchan. There are many posters of women from your films.
Yeah.
What's going on with the posters?
Yeah, I mean, I just love to see images. I love to see photographs. And I thought, like this Nine Rand line says, the interior of your office should look like the interior of your mind. It should represent you in some way. So anyone who comes into this office, they already know what kind of a person I am just by watching the photos and the decor. And more than anything else, I wanted it to be a talking point. I'm an attention seeker. Yeah.
There you go. That's the reason we have the
Yeah.
posters.
Yes.
Yes, yes. It looks, and this is in Hyderabad, right?
Yes.
And you have something similar in Andheri, right? It's called Company.
I used to have that company but post COVID, I kind of shifted the office here.
Oh, okay. So now you're pretty much based in Hyderabad.
Yes, yes,
Oh,
yes.
okay. I see. Finally, RGB, we are going to play a small rapid fire game that I call Shoot. I'm going to ask you very simple questions and you're going to shoot back quick answers. Okay. And most importantly, you cannot name more than one in your response, only one. So if I ask you to choose between two, you can only choose one. You cannot say pass. And if I ask you a question,
But then it depends on the question. I mean, I would not say something which will hurt someone or which
no,
will.
no, 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 no. Trust
Yeah,
me, it's none of these
yeah.
questions are like that. So this is not that kind of podcast. But I've tried to make these questions kind of fun. So you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go. Anne Rand or Sri Devi?
Ayn Rand.
Bruce Lee or Bachchan?
Bachchan.
Satya or Shiva?
Satya.
Jaws or Duel?
Joss.
Oscar or Palme d'Or?
I don't believe in awards.
Diwar or Dawn?
Diwar.
One film of yours that you're most proud of?
Rangila.
One director whose films you look forward to?
Steven Spielberg.
Genre you would like to explore with Madhuri Dixit?
With Madhuri Dixit. I mean, I'm not a fan of hers.
Genre you would like to explore with SRK?
Maybe some historical.
Period film?
Yeah.
A recent Indian film which you wish you had made?
Can't think of it. Maybe Kerala Story, I would think.
मन का रिश्ता और हम आपके दिल में रह के आपसे प्यार करने लगे?
Neither.
You know those titles, right?
Yes,
Obviously.
Yes.
Yeah. Great. This was fun, RGV. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I had been wanting to chat with you for a long time, and I'm glad that it
But
finally.
tell me, how do you manage to see so many films? Forget mine. You've seen almost all my films and all the
Because I love films.
How do you do it?
I'm a stereotypical
Really?
NRI, who works in tech and has Indian movies on his mind all the time. Thank you so much, RGV.
Nice chatting with you. Yeah.
A big shout out to Akshay Rathi for connecting me with RGV. Thanks again, Akshay. If you liked the episode, do consider supporting the show. Your support will help me continue creating content like this. You can find the link for supporting the show in the show notes and on the podcast website. And do share this episode on Twitter, Insta, or Facebook. And do subscribe, rate, and review the pod wherever you listen to your pods. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at loveofcinemasf8. Feel free to reach out there or by email with your comments, feedback, and suggestions. You can find my email in the show notes. That's the episode. This is Himanshu signing off. And as always, thank you for listening to the Love of Cinema podcast.